Do you think for 1 minute my kids will be good kids and straightened out and they'll love their dad and everything? I'm going to tell you right now what I would create is monsters, because I'm going to get more of the same. So we keep doing this. So now I've introduced the land cap bill. Okay, fair enough. And everybody should have their opinion on it. That's what I want. And at the end of the day, if I can't in the public arena get it through, then I shouldn't get it through, because the people will have spoken, folks like yourselves. And that's how the process is supposed to work. So how is it working? Well, I no sooner introduced it, and Kendra can attest, because Kendra's the one that tried to do this. She tried desperately to get the department to give us a number of how much land they own. What's your number? I've talked to several large land holding companies and asked them, do you know how much land you have? They know how much land they have right down to the acre. And they know what kind of land they have in the whole 9 yards. So we asked the department, how much land do you have? We couldn't get a response. We went to their website. On their website it said how much land they own. So that was the number we used. I testified multiple times in my committee that my intention was not to make the department start selling land. Just flat out was not my intention. But my intention was there needs to be a game plan and an end game. How much land should you own? For 6 years as a House member, I asked that question every single time, every year to Becky Humphreys. How much land do you plan on owning? Where are you going with it? And how much land? What's the plan? She told me it wasn't about the quantity. It was about the quality. And as long as there was quality land for sale, they were interested. So that was the plan. If it's quality land, the DNR wants it. I think that is wrong. There still needs to be some type of a plan. So that was the reason. Here's my point of bringing that up. I used their numbers, testified multiple times that my intent was not to make them sell off land. It was to get to an end game which was going to give them a lot of grace to get there. I get an alert sent out by MUCC to their members that I was going to make them sell land immediately. That was my intent. That's what they put out there. After hearing me say multiple times it wasn't, using the DNR number, and all of a sudden I'm thrown under the bus because that number wasn't correct. And they never once shared what I said publicly. And if you looked at using their number and the way we set it up, there was grace in there. There was no way they'd have to sell land. If Governor Snyder signed that bill today, the DNR would be buying land for the next 5-6 years without even thinking about having to sell a chunk of land. And even then, with the exemptions, they'd keep right on going. But that's what we're dealing with.
Stay tuned, I'll have more discovering following these messages.
It's a long way around, but guys, the reason I asked to come here is because after a year of being down there, I am convinced they are doing everything in their power to marginalize this group, to not even recognize you. Anytime I bring this group up and I say, where do they stand on the issue? They act like they don't have a clue, and they act like they're not interested. You're never brought up. You're never mentioned unless we do it, unless we, the elected officials, bring you up. You are never mentioned by the department, and I got to believe, guys, that knowing these people, they have let the department know at times where they stand on stuff. But you're never brought up. I'm concerned they're trying to marginalize you and take you right out of the picture. And I'm telling you, if they accomplish it, we're in trouble. Because you've got, I believe, a handful of people in Lower Michigan right now, and there might be some up here, I haven't been able to identify any names yet, we're working on it, that are influencing the direction of the natural resources. And here's where I get my feathers ruffled. They did not put a yard sign under anybody's yard and win over your vote, your support, to go down and influence policy down in Lansing. They did it by walking into a leadership pack and handing over a large check. They did it by being a part of these groups that are funneling this money back and forth between the grants and the department, or not the departments, but the grants and the groups. And so it appears to me they have a lot of say. So when they walk in and talk to leadership and say, we like this, all of a sudden, boom, the legislature comes alive, and all of a sudden you see things moving, and everybody's humming on the same page. When those handful don't like what's happening, things get muddied down. Because why? these groups have a lot of influence, and they just rev up the troops, and away they go, and they start pounding on the legislature, and the legislature's in there not knowing the difference. And I'm partly guilty of that. First being down there, I didn't know this. I didn't know that money was flowing like that. So all I'm asking is, if you're frustrated or you think that money influences elected officials, please consider the fact that money is influencing some of these major groups. And the reason I say that is because I'm concerned good policy for us, natural resources, is not getting back to you because there's people influencing it that have a different agenda than what we the people have. And I'm also suggesting we got to try and stop that kind of influence, and that's part of where we come in, because I believe that the person that put the yard signs out to represent all of you is your voice. And here's how it works. I can't get anything done unless I convince a majority of my colleagues in the Senate. Ed can't get one thing done in the House unless he convinces a majority of his colleagues and then ultimately come over to my chamber and vice versa. I believe in that policy, and I think it's right. I believe in that system. And it's not an easy one, but I believe in it. I think we're being circumvented. I really do. And how are we doing it? Well, the department comes out with a policy, and they do an order, and boom, all of a sudden some major issue hits the fan, and the order's through. And I think Ed will probably talk a little bit about an order and where it's taken us. And I'm suggesting, because I heard a little bit here about one group is doing this and the other group's doing that, not denying that, but I would caution you, be careful, guys. You better work very hard at trying to stay together, because the influence is incredible. And it's from top down, and it's not from your elected officials as much as it is from internal people. And why am I rifled about it? Because I think they're taking our very form of government away from us. Because it should be, we represent you. And when November comes around in 2014 and you don't like what I've done, or you think I've just gone off on a tangent, your voice is going to be heard loud and clear, and it's going to be heard in November at the ballot box. And it should be. How's it being heard right now with the department? You pick the department. Stop picking on DNR for a minute. How's it being heard by you right now? When a department head signs an order, how is it being heard by you? And somebody just said about these work groups. They put these work groups together. Guys, they're putting these things together. They're stacking the deck, and then they put the information in. They already know what the information is coming out. So what do? Then again, back to the legislature and say, well, we had a work group, and the work group came up with this. I'll go back to the horse issue. We passed legislation. That means your voice was heard, because we passed the legislation. We had a majority in the Senate, majority in the House, and Governor Granholm signed the bill. It stipulated in that piece of legislation that the equine task force that was put together must come up with recommendations. They were to evaluate where these folks were riding and evaluate whether they were good or not, why they should or shouldn't, and was there any problems. But they were to make recommendations to the department. That was how the bill was written. You know what happened? Not one recommendation was made by the equine task force. There was a few in there. They were the minority. They were the minority. There was a few in there that came up with a plan and put a proposal forth. Not that that had to be what it was, but they put a proposal forth. Said, what about this? It was tabled, wasn't taken up for discussion. I was at the meeting in the Pigeon River. John Madigan sat there with me. I described it to him. We looked at the law. I said, John, does that seem right to you? And he didn't really say a whole lot. Here's what they did. Lynn Boyd came in with a recommendation. Donna Stein delivered it and said, here's what the department believes should happen. What do you think that equine task force did? They took the recommendation from the department, bang, rubber stamped it, boom, here's our plan. That's one little example of how these work groups are working right now, guys. And again, we're busy. I think you heard Dale mention about being busy, and I know all of you are. Guys, that's what we're faced with.
Next week, we'll learn more about that and hear from State Representative Ed McBroom of Iron River. Stay tuned.